We were talking, it was funny. We weren't even going to start the podcast, but it was so easy through Anchor. It's free. There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or on your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more places. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Stoned Age Living Podcast. This is your boy Life Locks. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Spotify at Stoned Age Living, minus the G. We appreciate you for coming through. All right, let's kick things off with the strain of the day, Panama Red. Hailing from the Central American country, its namesake, Panama Red, is a sativa-leaning strain that has been coveted by cannabis enthusiasts dating back to the 1960s. In the early days of the counterculture movement, back when THC potency was much lower, Panama Red was praised for creating a psychedelic and euphoric high with a greater cerebral effects over a typical body high. Jumping into our first cannabis story today, cannabis cravings differ between the sexes. Women who regularly consume cannabis experience more intense cravings for the drug than their male counterparts. The researchers from the Center for Brain Health first recruited 112 participants, 54 female, 58 male, who had consumed cannabis at least 5,000 times. In the study, these heavy cannabis users were given a piece of cannabis equipment to hold and asked to rate their urge to use marijuana on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 ranking highest. On average, the female participants ranked their cravings at 5.5, while male participants' average was 4.6. When the female consumers were categorized by their self-reported menstrual cycles, the researchers found that those in the follicular phase, when estrogen levels increased, showed a significantly higher craving response compared to male users. While cannabis consumption has historically been higher in men, data shows significant increases among women in regions with legal recreational access. As many of the scientific studies into marijuana's effects on the body have been conducted on male participants, some researchers are now concerned that there is a lack of clarity on how women respond to the drug. This is what a senior lecturer had to say about the topic. I'm concerned why researchers continue to overwhelmingly focus on what happens to men when they use cannabis, given that millions of women around the world use it. There are far more powerful men in positions in academia and there are women, he added, and I think that's probably contributed to this bias, which I don't think is unique to drugs and cannabis. I think it's probably the case across all areas of health. All right. A lot of interesting points were definitely made in this article. Women should be probably represented a little bit more in terms of research in the cannabis field, primarily due to the fact that any man or woman came from a woman. So these are the people that are going to be carrying the next set of children for every single generation. So more female-specific cannabis research is definitely going to be necessary. Now, in terms of women craving cannabis more than men, there could be something biologically that is actually going on. However, I think that there's a lot more research that just needs to be done. It's hard to call from just going on this one experiment or this one set of research. So definitely something we'll look forward to in the future if we can find more information on it. If this allows the medical community to maybe push for more research for women, that would definitely be a move in the right direction. Moving on to our second story today. County awards $180,000 in cannabis micro grants via Project Trellis. After an awkward volley of mild recriminations, the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors today handed out the first round of grants through Project Trellis, the country's three-pronged economic stimulus program for fledgling legal cannabis industry. 14 companies received a total of $179,000, with awards ranging from just under $10,000 to $50,000. Project Trellis is funded through a 10% diversion of revenues from Measure S, the county's Cannabis Cultivation Tax. All right, pretty good article here. Definitely good news to hear about a lot of money going back to cannabis business owners, especially due to the fact that the government cut out a lot of cannabis businesses when it filed the first stimulus package. So this is definitely a good thing to hear. Now, paying attention here, we also want to note that most of this came from a cannabis cultivation tax from earlier in the year. So they're basically still getting their own money back. So, I mean, it's not as positive as them actually giving free money to these cannabis businesses as they did with a lot of other businesses such as Shake Shack and then they end up giving the money back and things like that. But a lot of this money is still money that was generated by these businesses. So it's kind of a bittersweet thing, in my opinion, probably for a lot of these business owners. But definitely a up for your business to get back money that you thought you were going to have to pay. Moving into our final cannabis story today. Some Pennsylvania Republicans want to legalize marijuana after coronavirus blew a hole in the budget. It's inevitable. There's growing voter support and some assurance that the issue is no longer political poison, and there are tax windfalls, potentially huge revenues to be gleaned if a bill can win bipartisan support in Harrisburg. For those reasons, some Republican lawmakers in Pennsylvania are now coming around, if slowly, to the idea of legalizing marijuana for adult recreational use. Since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, the state has lost almost $4 billion in tax revenue. That gap is only growing bigger. The Independent Fiscal Office last month warned taxpayers to be prepared for a significant reduction in essential services. Meanwhile, states with legalized recreational marijuana are reaping major tax revenues. And with New York, New Jersey, and Maryland considering legalizing marijuana for recreational use, the state risks losing cannabis sales to its neighbors. For a state where tax receipts total more than $35 billion, the additional tax collections from marijuana alone would not solve the budget problem, but they could help the states fund starved schools or repair crumbling roads and bridges. For courts and prisons, legalizing would wipe out the cost of prosecuting marijuana-related offenses altogether. Stop the bleeding. There is definitely going to be a lot of money that is generated in the cannabis sector if they can legalize this recreational marijuana to assist them with, like they said, building schools, bridges, fixing streets, things like that. But for them to have a significant reduction in essential services while still attempting to prosecute people for marijuana and putting people in prison and things like that, those are things that actually cost our state money. Therefore, if they could eliminate those costs, that would definitely assist with the debt problem. So it wouldn't solve the problem 100%, but it would definitely be a step in the right direction, because over 10 to 15 years, you're definitely going to probably see a significant amount of tax dollars that are going to go towards things that are going to bring the debt down a lot. We see it in every single city that legalizes recreational marijuana due to the fact that all this money basically just flies in from the black market. It converts from the black market into the legal market, which in turn is just a benefit for our actual state. So definitely a step in the right direction. It's about time. As they said in the article at the beginning, this is inevitable. It's probably going to happen at a much, much bigger scale. I feel like definitely with all of these talks about the coronavirus cure and CBD helping be a preventative measure and all of these things, is doing nothing but rationalizing the legalization of cannabis at a global scale. I definitely agree with the beginning of the article. This is probably inevitable for most states that still have not legalized recreational marijuana, and this also goes for us as a country as a whole. But the state has lost over $4 billion in tax revenue. I mean, they have to do something to